everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to the PraxisAuril KE and Coffee. I'm Alasdair Cameron. I'm the Director of Strategic Engagement. Tamsin, would you like to say hello?
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Tamsin Mann, Director of Policy and Communications.
Okay, just up front, this webinar is being recorded. We will make it available for others to view who haven't been able to join us today. Your mics and your videos are all on mute at the moment. If you can please keep your mic on mute as we go through. We'll use the raise the hand function within Zoom. So if you want to ask a question or make a comment, then please do that. And we will come to you and turn on or request to turn on your video and your mic. So if you could wait for us to do that, that would be great. The chat should be available throughout, so feel free to chat to each other or type some questions in there. Tamsin and I, as usual, will have a bit of an initial discussion to try and provoke some questions, and then we'll open it up for questions and comments. Okay, so today we've got 3 reports to go through. Tamsin picks this as it's better to look at these things in a family than it is individually, and I think it is because the kind of you get a more textured and complete picture when you look at this kind of data from multiple angles. So the 3 reports, we've got the latest UK Innovation Survey data. We've got a report on academic industry links from the Association of the British Pharmaceutical Industry, and we've got the IPO's IP filing habits of UK HEIs, as said from the IPO, with the spin-out data provided by Beauhurst. So the first 2 reports are very much on the demand, so looking at industry side, the UKIS from a broad point of view, and the ABPI from a more sector. So if we looked at the UK Innovation Survey to start with, not the most inspiring reading, I have to say. So this is from data from 2016 to 2018. They sampled 31,000 businesses, 10 or more employees, and they had responses from 14,000. What does it say? 38% of UK businesses were innovation active, down from 49%. Large businesses are more likely to be innovative than SMEs, and the most innovative sectors, production and construction, in comparison to distribution and services, which were less so. Tamsin, your interesting points from this?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a survey that I've looked at over the last couple of years that it's been released, and obviously it's a lag in terms of the data. It's quite and all of these reports have different kinds of data lags. But I think what's interesting about this survey is it doesn't have a very high profile. I've struggled to find people really talking about it much, and I do think it's important for us to consider the demand side much more than we do in our conversations about R&D and innovation, because we so often end up just talking about how, you know, the problems that universities and research organisations have with you know, getting more innovation out there, getting more ideas out there, and helping companies to be more innovative. So I think it is an important survey to look at, and yeah, you're right. I mean, this year it makes quite depressing reading if you're in the business of trying to increase levels of R&D and get companies to think more about how they can improve products, services, management techniques. And I think one of the things that's interesting is it's quite a broad definition of innovation. It's not just about products and services. It is about kind of in-house systems and skills as well, and things like that. So that's why I like it, you know, compared to other surveys which focus more on that R&D spend, which we all know isn't the total picture. Yeah, and I think it's part of a bigger European EU Community Innovation Survey, which I haven't gone and looked at yet, but it'll be interesting to see how the UK compares in that market as well. So yeah, and it links to the other 2 reports I picked up, just because it's interesting to see how whether the demand side actually reflects anything that we see happening on that kind of supply side, and with the ABPI review, whether that particular sector is reflecting anything that the innovation survey has found.
Yeah. So I mean, again, looking at some of the depressing statistics, so innovation decreased in all regions and countries, and you know, from my own point of view, the largest decrease was in Scotland, down from 45 to 33. That's quite a drop. You know, again, looking at from the university, or trying to see the university effect in here, the most innovative active regions are South East and East, which continually come up, which I guess a lot of that driven by the proximity to Oxford and Cambridge. Yeah. You know, again, another surprising thing for me, most businesses only operate in the UK. So of those surveyed, again, a very parochial.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, the survey says right at the beginning that this is although there is some effort clearly made to contact businesses, and they do phone interviews as well as it just being on an online response. It is, businesses have to kind of volunteer themselves as being innovative. So it's there's possibly a wider pool that they could draw on. But it does say right at the beginning that you know, if the way they define innovators, and they have these various definitions of broad innovators and wider innovators, and some businesses tick boxes which puts them in a certain category, and they may not realise that, or they may not think of themselves as innovative, which I think is interesting. So that's about an attitude to innovation, isn't it? It's about, do you recognise something you're doing is innovative or is counted as innovative? And that's always the trouble with metrics, is, you know, if you tell somebody that they've got to behave in a certain way so that it can be counted, then does that mean that they're more likely to act like that, or is it going to kind of stop them in some way? So, but yeah, and the geography is obviously interesting because there's so much discussion in other reports. I mean, last week we talked about the place-based R&D. We've seen Nesta's report come out recently, and the importance of, you know, in terms of university research as being a pull for inward innovation. But then if the demand side doesn't have that same, you know, international focus, that's interesting as well. Although possibly, you know, that's good news for UK universities and their kind of more civic mission or their regional missions. If that's where UK businesses are primarily looking for innovation, is locally, then that's possibly a good, you know, something that we should see as a good sign.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one of the interesting things for me was the you know, working with universities was quite low down on that list when it looked at.
It's low down, but it's pretty constant. So yeah, it's low, but it's constant. Yeah, which I don't think would come as a surprise to many of us, because we know that, well, the NCUB report that found 400 businesses doing, you know, responsible for most of the R&D in the UK. So if you think at 5% of that 14,000, then that, you know, it's not a massive surprise, but it's kind of sobering when you see these percentages in this kind of survey, I think.
Yeah. Okay, and so that report did highlight, you know, the most innovative sector, which actually includes pharmaceutical biotech, and then we've got the APBI links report, which kind of delves into that in a bit more detail. So that an innovative sector and how it engages with the HEIs. So you're getting any interesting take homes from that?
Yeah, well, I picked up, I mean, the ABPI report has just come out, and obviously, you know, one of our stalwart long-standing members and ambassadors, Malcolm Skingle, is very involved with this community and has done a blog on the report and his thoughts on it. I picked it up partly for that reason, but also because I think it is important for us to hear from the demand side, and this kind of deep dive into what one particular sector is doing with the research base is really interesting, and it's a great testimonial to how much, you know, it's only 15 companies in this report, but how much they are doing, you know, the geographic spread, the disciplinary spread, and not only that, but the range of business activities that the research base is feeding into, you know, right through from undergraduate to postgraduate. It's not just about pharmaceutical R&D, it's about supply chains, it's about marketing, it's about business processes. which again, I think is a really important bit of the story that we don't hear when we talk about R&D, and we don't hear when we talk about university business collaboration. It's not just about the product, it's about all sorts of different aspects of running a business. So I thought that was really important. There was a kind of similar-ish report out from Cambridge University and their relationship with Aviva, which I would have brought in, but it was a bit too late. But also another kind of testimonial as to the breadth of engagement across that particular HEI. I like that it talked about things like case awards, which we don't talk about at all, really, unless you're, I can't really think about case awards in the last 5 years that I've been at Praxis, but obviously they're an important vehicle for collaboration here. And
again, the report suggested that there was an increase in the focus around apprenticeships.
Yeah.
They saw as a bit of a quite a change in approach. I think they commented that postdoc research was down a bit, but they felt that this might be the fact that they're having the relationships now exist with larger groups.
So that point about bigger collaborations was made, wasn't it? So that the one collaboration might actually involve a lot of partners, which I'm sure is true. And that point they make about the fact that the collaborations are happening over a longer period of time, so it's 4 to 5 years rather than 3 years, which is good. Again, it kind of reduces the churn, and it gives chance for relationships to really bed in. But I think the point they make about apprenticeships is this is the industry responding to government incentives, clearly. But it also, it comes back to the point that we often make about people being such an important vehicle for knowledge exchange. And actually the innovation survey picks up on that as well. Right at the end, I think it talks about the importance of skilled people in businesses, and by skilled people they mean people with degrees and postgraduate degrees, and that being a particular feature of those businesses that are innovative. They have skilled individuals, and we're clearly seeing this in the ABPI as well, the investment they put into undergraduate support and postgraduate support, and this focus on the movement of academics and research scientists between the research base and industry. These are all things we know, but it's good to see it being written down and talked about by this in this report.
Yeah, that sabbatical type initiative seemed to come across as a very positive trend. I guess a final interesting statistic for me: 60% of research collaborations are with UK HEIs, 20% with US. So still, these companies operating in the UK working just over, well, I'm going to say just over half, 60% of the time with local institutions.
And that kind of does reflect the pull, that are the strength of our research base is still being reflected there.
Okay, so if we turn to, if you want, the supply side, to the IPO's IP filing habits of UK HEIs. Now, I think this is over a 10-year period.
20.
Sorry, yeah, my maths is out of line. This is the first of this type of report that they've produced. So it's from 1999 to 2018, and they've said that IP has doubled over that period, but has been increasing in line with global patenting activity. 1% of patents from UK HEIs, so 1% of the global patenting activity comes from UK HEIs, and of the 165 HEIs, 121 had at least one patent application during that time.
I mean, like all kind of very data heavy reports, the question we always ask is, are these good numbers? And it's quite hard to tell with some of these numbers because they're not put in context. It doesn't tell us how many patents there are. It doesn't put that 1% in context. But I think that the fact that the trend is moving in line with the global trend should tell us that, you know, there's nothing going wrong here. We're on the right trajectory, so that's good. Yeah, the figure about the number of HAIs with a patent, well, we'd probably be worried if that number was low, and it's about right, but it still means that there's some HAIs not patenting. But we do get very hung up on patents, and it's not just, you know, patents are an asset, it's what you do with the asset that matters, really. So whilst it's good to talk about patents and have a different view from the Hep C data, which, you know, they say there's some slight, it doesn't correlate exactly because of the way it's tracked. It's good, you know, the IPO should be the place, I feel, that is producing the patent data, and it did make me wonder whether universities need to kind of count their patents when the IPO could do it for them, you know. So there's questions that arise here in terms of what the IPO is trying to tell us, but also should, you know, who should be the data collector, who should have the authority about this kind of data here. Okay,
and I mean, it does take great pains to say that, you know, the government, the extra support they've put in around business and universities working together to innovate and commercialise research. They do state that licensing of IP is one of the approaches that a university might choose to commercialise its research. The other that they suggest is also spin-outs. Again, another potential support, and we do tend to talk about spin-outs quite a lot alongside IP. So that, I mean, they've gone in. Beauhurst have provided some information and looked at spin-outs, and UK HAIs are increasing rate of spin-out businesses. So that's good.
Yeah, I mean, we do see these figures broadly going in the same direction, the Hep C data. So again, there's no surprises for me. It is, you know, it's interesting. How do we put this alongside Hep C data, and how do we make sense of the kind of stories that both sets of data are telling us? We do try to not get too hung up on spin-outs. I don't think we talk enough about licensing and what actually, you know, as I say, what the outcomes are of that activity, rather than just always thinking about spin-outs. But of course, this report does talk about the geography of spin-outs, which is interesting and something we don't see in the Hep C data, and that you know, the interest there is at the moment, somewhere like City Ready, which is doing that analysis of the local impact of spin-outs. And so if spin-outs are staying largely next to their kind of parent HEI, what implication does that have for creating local employment, but also creating kind of connections back to the HEI and doing more research and more R&D investment, of course. Yeah, so I think the other thing is that, you know, in the Hep C data, we don't see that the kind of the patenting fields, we don't get any disciplinary cuts in the data in Hep C, and I don't think we want to go down that route either. I mean, we could say the same about the KEF, you know, but I think the IPO report finds the same predominance of patents filed in the field of chemistry, doesn't it? So kind of reflects that what we see in the ABPI, you know, that high level of engagement with the research base, which nobody would think was particularly unusual because it's the pharmaceutical sector. Yeah. So, but we see that in the supply side data as well, which is, I guess, good because they're both telling the same story.
I mean, it reminds me of a point I think I made before about the lack of a kind of cohesive picture in the UK of tying all these different data sets together, and we've kind of lamented the departure of the Smart Specialisation hub as something that was trying to pull this, and certainly looking at it appeared to look down at a more regional level and try and understand it better. Certainly, I think for trying to set regional and national policy without a real detailed understanding on what's going on, you know, you're kind of shooting in the dark a wee bit to try and figure out what's going to work and what hasn't. Any final points, Tamsin, before we open up for?
Yeah, I mean, I think that point about bringing this data all together is a really important one, and it's, you know, we can do so much, but really you need people who can crunch the data and understand the weaknesses in the data and the strengths of the data. And we know that Thomas Coates-Ulrichsen at Cambridge has won funding in a group, won funding from Research England to create a centre which will try and bring together many more data sets to think about the questions that we're all asking about the effect of investment in the research base, and that spill out into businesses and other organisations for economic and social innovation, I guess.
Okay, fab. Thank you. Really interesting as usual. So open it up now for questions or comments. As I said, if you can just click on the raise hand, and we'll try and come to you as quick as we can. So anybody out there got any questions?
Stunned everybody into silence this week, I think.
Well, before we start picking on people, are likely to get picked on if there aren't any questions.
Well, I mean, people are thinking of questions if they've got any. I mean, one of the other reports that we could have added to this pile, I mean, I could just keep adding reports to this pile actually, is the report that Alex Chakes did for BBSRC, where he was looking at BBSRC grants, linking them to patents, and then linking the patents to fields of use. And that really demonstrated that it wasn't, there wasn't necessarily a straight line from that BBSRC research base through to patent field of use, which I thought was really interesting, because that was totally bringing together supply and demand. And I was hopeful that more research councils would do that kind of analysis.
Right. Nobody's asked a question, so I'm going to Dan King, I know you put a blog on the...
Sorry, I've spent the last 3 minutes furiously trying to find the button that does the... Oh, sorry. I've just spent the last few minutes furiously trying to find the button that raises my hand, and I can't find it anywhere. So I'm it's complete user failure at this end. But I was actually, as you were talking, I was looking at the first report, the innovation survey. And I still have this thing that bugs me about place. Like, what is the, sorry, I'm looking at the camera now.
No, it's all right.
You guys on the screen over that side. I've got multiple screens going. What is the thing that determines the place? So I had a look at the survey that they actually developed for that, and I couldn't see any questions in it. And it still have this nagging doubt, which stems from the work we did around the science innovation audit for the Midlands, around what is the place of a business. Now, if it's a small business with 1 location and 10 employees, easy. But if it's a Rolls-Royce, where is Rolls-Royce? And what is it you measure about where is Rolls-Royce? Is it where they file their patents? Probably London, and Innovate UK data typically lists Rolls-Royce as London. Is it where their manufacturing capabilities are, their people, their R&D, many kind of questions around what is the place of a business that I think I'm still not convinced. I have this nagging feeling we haven't quite got into the skin of, despite the wealth of reports and reviews about place and R&D and investment, several just recently around R&D and place and what that means in terms of the businesses there. But for some of those biggest, that 400 you mentioned, the big R&D players, quite a few of them have different locations and different, to some degree, different divisions going on there. And that I think is, I don't know, I still feel we haven't quite grasped that nettle. And sometimes I couldn't actually find out from that innovation survey how they actually decided the place, because it wasn't in the questionnaire. So how did they tag East Midlands or Northwest in that survey? So it was quite clear on the other questions, but that I couldn't find it. So anyway, that's just a thought that I still feel we're not there on yet.
Yeah, I think it's I think that's right. And I think the trouble is, I know when the Smart Specialisation Hub were operational, they had the same, they said, well, we use, registered address as, as the place, because that's the official data, and, we have to use the official data. But you do get the same with some universities as well that have multiple campuses. They will have one registered address, which won't necessarily. So but it's problematic.
But it is, I think, part of that question about what is it we're trying to measure and understand. I did some work with some of the chemistry industry organisations back in the days of the RDAs, and said to them, in terms of conversations locally with your RDAs, think about the people you employ in your areas, because that resonates with the RDA in different dimensions than necessarily saying we've got X number of businesses as members. But if you articulate it in their local area in terms of employees, it's a much more powerful argument. And I think some of the questions around place still need to kind of be uncovered in terms of what actually is the presence that we're trying to measure and why that's important. And when you see things like placements, secondments, employment, R&D relationships. These have different sort of tensions regarding place that you can explore in different ways.
Yeah, and I think the way we talk about R&D makes a lot of assumptions as well. I mean, Mark has made a comment on the chat about, you know, we measure the number of interactions instead of the quality of interactions. And we keep, you know, we have swung a little bit to, you know, we do try to talk more about outcomes. You know, that's the word that's used now, outcomes rather than just outputs. And it's much more difficult to capture. But I think that's why having testimonials is very important. And the more, you know, we can do as an organisation to make those voices heard, to hear companies of all different kinds to say, it's not just about the kind of, so when I worked in tech transfer, we always talked about purple widgets when we were talking about case. So it's not just about the purple widgets, it's about, you know, it is about the people, it is about the processes, and it's about how we can work more effectively and better, and how we can, you know, how knowledge exchange does help to bring different people together. It's not always about that thing. And the trouble is with, you know, when we're talking about patents, we kind of have this, for me, it kind of conjures up images of, you know, of things being lobbed over a wall and hoping that they'll be used by somebody out there. But that's not what universities do. And yeah, so it's about those assets, the quality of those assets, and then what happens to them afterwards.
Okay, we're hitting our 30-minute window, so I think we'll call it there, if that's okay with you, Tamsin.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's fine. Yeah, as ever, we could go on talking for much longer, but
okay, thanks everyone for joining us. We'll be back next week. Tamsin's going to have a rifle through her paper file and come up with another
another riveting read.
And I'll try and post it on the PraxisAuril online community in advance, so that if you are looking for something to peruse in the meantime, you can have a read at it and then join us next week when we'll have another conversation. So thanks again, Tamsin. Thanks to everybody who's joined us, and hope to see you all soon. Bye.
Bye.